With the addition of Blake Snell, the San Francisco Giants have had the huge offseason that they pretty much desperately needed to have, that, in my opinion, has vaulted them into the thick of the NL wildcard conversation, given that you're in a division with a juggernaut in the Dodgers. And as I said yesterday, this is a team that you do not want to have to face in the playoffs if they make it there.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015. I've been hosting this show. I believe today is the 5-year anniversary, so woohoo. And I'm a lifelong San Francisco Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there. Please hit that subscribe button, thumbs up button, wherever it is that you're following the show. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. And coming up on today's show, it's going to be a longer, fuller, more in-depth analysis of the Giants signing of Blake Snell. If you caught yesterday's episode, even if you didn't, I would encourage you to check that out too, because that's kind of instant reaction, shorter episode. But today we're going to go into a little bit more detail and also discuss the Giants offseason as a whole and kind of the roster outlook with the addition of Blake Snell. I will reiterate that at the time of this recording, which is kind of midday on Tuesday, the 19th, this deal is not yet official. It is pending a physical, but Susan Slusser of the Chronicle reported that the physical was likely to take place today and that a press conference would be tomorrow. And so you could get an announcement from the Giants as early as tonight, I would imagine. The physical process is kind of long. You know, you got to do MRIs and stuff of the arm and all that. So anyway, yes, so the Giants have agreed to terms, is kind of the best way to put it, on a 2-year, $62 million deal with the reigning National League Cy Young Award winner Blake Snell. This deal does include an opt-out after the 2024 season. It is a huge drop-off from what expectations were for what Snell would get in this market, and there's just really no other way to describe it than a great deal for the San Francisco Giants to just reel in the reigning National League Cy Young Award winner, a guy who over the last 2 seasons is second in ERA, second in strikeout percentage, without having to commit to a long term, which is risky for pitchers. And he's 31, and originally we were thinking this would take at least 4 years, but probably 5-6 years to get him at an average annual value, not too much lower than what they end up at here. And that's what he wanted initially, from what we heard. It's like $30 million a year-ish over like 6 years or more. And they end up getting him 2 years, $62 million with the opt-out. It's a little bit of a funky contract structure in that the way it's paid out is that they owe him just $15 million in 2024, so this upcoming season. And then there's a $17 million signing bonus payable in January 2026 that will pay him that's it. So, yeah, and then I don't have actually the full thing. So that includes if he opts out. And so regardless, he gets that 30 that would be $32 million, even if he leaves, and if it's the full 2 years, then the $62 million. So anyway, regardless, the point that I want to make is about the pitcher more than the contract. And for Snell, like I said, second in ERA, second in strikeout percentage over the last 2 seasons combined, minimum 300 innings pitched. And who is Blake Snell? I mean, what is his pitch mix, for example? And it's a 4-pitch mix with a 4-seam fastball that averages last year 95.5 miles an hour. So he's a left-handed pitcher, power pitcher, strikeout machine, gets a lot of swings and misses. One of the highest whiff rates in baseball, especially on some particular pitches like his curveball, which, according to Baseball Savant, was the 6th most valuable pitch in baseball last season. Logan Webb's changeup was actually the 2nd most valuable pitch in baseball, with a run value of 28 runs. I don't know if that's like above average or what, but Blake Snell's curveball was worth 22 runs, either above average or just in general. I don't know, but he only throws it, only threw it 20% of the time. So this is a counting stat. And so if you throw that curveball a little bit more, then maybe it's even more valuable. Like you can just rack up more in terms of run value by throwing that pitch. But I'm sure there's a reason that the mix was what it was. And actually I saw a little interview with him in which he credits his changeup developing into a better pitch that actually was the key for him, that kind of unlocked everything. But he's thrown the changeup for a long time, so I don't know exactly what he changed with the changeup, but that was also a very effective pitch for him. Averages 86.7 miles an hour, curveball 81, slider 88.4. And so, yeah, you're just getting a power arm. You're getting not a lot of downside because at the very worst, it's a 2-year commitment. And at the very best, you're getting a total ace to pair with Logan Webb. And this is the first time, courtesy of Sarah Langs of MLB.com, the great Sarah Langs, that a team has had the number 1 and number 2 Cy Young finishers in a league in a rotation since Randy Johnson and Curt Schilling in like 2003 or 2002 or something like that. So it has been a long time since any team has been able to put together a 1-2 punch quite like this, where they're first and second the previous year in Cy Young voting. So that's what the Giants have done here, and it's not just Blake Snell. Like, it'd be one thing if this was their move. I know a lot of people, when they signed Jung-Hoo Lee, I was getting comments on Twitter and YouTube and stuff like, oh, I'm afraid that they're just going to sell this as like their big move and that they're going to be done after this. I never thought that was remotely what was likely. I know they made a legitimate pursuit of Ohtani and Yoshinobu Yamamoto, but outside of that, once they didn't get those guys, they just ended up getting a ton of guys, and it's added up to what I would definitely call an A offseason. Want to give them an A+, go right ahead, give them an A+. Like it's not like a bunch. I've seen some people calling it a bunch of incremental moves, but no, they've added some. Like, outside of Ohtani and Yamamoto, they added 2 of the next best free agents, in my opinion, in Chapman and Snell, and then a lot of additional upside. I mean, Jung-Hoo Lee, Jorge Soler, Jordan Hicks, a better kind of catcher to pair with Patrick Bailey. So we're going to get into the totality of the Giants offseason and how the roster is shaping up, coming up in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you in part by our good friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks. You simply pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and then afterwards you just watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including, yes, California, Texas, and Georgia. Prize Picks now offers Apple Pay for a quick and easy way to deposit into your account this upcoming baseball season, basketball season right now, the college tournament right now. So anyway, testing my skills on Prize Picks this season is going to be the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $1,000 with just a few taps. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100 like I did. Again, download the app today, use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. All right, here we go. We are going to discuss the Giants roster, or not roster, but the moves that they've made in totality and how, to me, it all fairly easily adds up to an A offseason, and an offseason that has vaulted them, in my opinion, into the thick of that conversation for a playoff spot. I mean, I don't want to just concede the division here on March 19th, but you are dealing with a juggernaut Dodgers team that's like averaging 107 wins a season, a little over that actually, the last like 3 or 4 years combined. And so that's tough. The Giants had to win 107 to win the division in 2021, and so it's tough playing in this National League West. But as we've seen, a lot of wildcard teams have, if you win that wildcard round, you're sitting pretty because you're coming off a postseason series win, and the teams that you're going to then play have been sitting around for a little while, and we've seen a lot of upsets, and teams like the D-backs and the Phillies have gone on to the World Series as wildcard teams. By the way, as you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today, but baseball fans, mark your calendars for tomorrow, March 20th at 4 p.m. Pacific for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th at 4 p.m. Pacific, be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th at 4 Pacific on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Of course, I will be appearing on that show, and so check it out March 20th at 4 Pacific. So now I just want to discuss the Giants offseason in totality. I'm not sure they're 100% done, but I certainly think the heavy lifting is done at this point. I don't anticipate they're going to also go out and sign Jordan Montgomery. I also want to discuss like the financial ramifications here. The Giants are pushing their chips into the middle with a payroll that now comes in at an estimated $208 million, which would be their highest payroll basically since Farhan Zaidi took over, and that's around where it was when he first got here, and they were bad and they had a high payroll. So now it's like the cycle is complete where they're trying to be good and have a high payroll. And they were stuck with some rough contracts at the time, but that's not really the case now. I would say all these contracts are looking good, and they've got some young, they've definitely like improved their young talent and pipeline and all that. Their luxury tax payroll, by the way, now stands at an estimated $0.8 million, and that is just below the second luxury tax threshold. So the Giants have blown past the first luxury tax threshold. This, assuming they don't shed a bunch of money, which it would really, really be difficult to get under the $237 million first threshold. It's not going to happen. Like, they're exceeding the luxury tax for the first time since 2017 with this addition of Blake Snell. So for all those of you who have justifiably not been happy about their spending and all that, they have bucked the trend here, and they are pushing their chips into the middle. And their payroll, let me just see if I can get a quick number. $208 million, this is not the luxury tax payroll, comes in at number 10. So it's not like they're top 5 even, but number 10, top 10 payroll in the game right now on a kind of not the luxury tax payroll. I think their luxury tax payroll is 6th, $256 million. And this number is kind of more important in some ways. And it's calculated differently, the 6th highest luxury tax payroll in baseball. So this is what fans have been clamoring for a long time, and they've done it. And so the moves that they've made in order to get to this point, let's just discuss in totality the moves they've made, including, let's get into also the players they didn't bring back or the players they quote-unquote lost. But in terms of overall commitments, you had 6 years, $113 million to Jung-Hoo Lee. That is the largest commitment they made this offseason, and there is an opt-out after 4 years. So you're getting at least 4 years of Jung-Hoo Lee here. And the Fangraphs projection is 3.4 wins above replacement, which is very, very strong for Jung-Hoo Lee. So the second largest commitment goes to Blake Snell at a guaranteed 2 years, $62 million, and a Fangraphs wins above replacement projection of 3, which, Fangraphs WAR uses fielding independent pitching for its, in its calculation, whereas Snell has consistently outperformed his fielding independent pitching in his career. And so last year, for example, according to WAR on Fangraphs, Snell was at 4.1. But if you look at runs allowed per 9 WAR also on Fangraphs, 7.4. And so if you're talking about just actual results versus theoretical results, that was much better for Snell. And so when you're talking about 3 as the projection here, it's actually 3.4 if you look at the runs allowed per 9 projection. So I think they should use that instead, because that's what they're saying. That's what they're guessing he'll actually produce from a run prevention standpoint. So anyway, kind of a little nit to pick for me there. But their third largest commitment was to Matt Chapman, a 3-year, $54 million guarantee, opt-outs after every year, and a 4th-year mutual option. They committed 4 years, $44 million to Jordan Hicks, plan to use him in the rotation. This is a guy who's been a reliever but has always wanted to be a starter, has been known to throw 105-mile-an-hour sinkers, and he's looked pretty good when I've seen him this spring, at times dominant. And so that's definitely an intriguing player in the mix there. And if it doesn't work out, especially now that you've added Snell, you have the option of moving him to the bullpen, where that contract to me still looks very reasonable. This contract was in line with industry expectations, whereas the Snell and the Chapman deals were way below industry expectations. They also signed Jorge Soler to a deal that was roughly in line with industry expectations. 3 years, $42 million to be a huge kind of power DH. Just stick him into the DH spot every day and watch him hit a bunch of homers. Hopefully be the first Giant since 2004 to hit at least 30 homers. He hit 36 last year. Tom Murphy, a 2-year, $8.25 million guarantee with a 3rd-year club option. And I think that he's a really good backup catcher. Hits left-handed pitching really well, so you can kind of leverage his strength by, catchers need days off. Like Patrick Bailey's going to need days off. And so if there's a lefty on the mound, historically, if you look at minor league numbers, Bailey has been worse against left-handed pitching. Murphy's been really good in the major leagues against left-handed pitching. So tough lefty on the mound, throw Murphy in when Bailey needs a day off. and expect to get good offensive production. And it means probably the end of the Joey Bart era in San Francisco, given that he's out of minor league options. And so we're just barely over a week away from the start of the season. So something's going to happen there in the next 9 days or so with Joey Bart. I can't even say I would imagine. Something has to happen. He either has to be on the roster, which I see no fit, or they will have to trade him or DFA him. So those are the only options. So in totality, that just, to me, adds up to an offseason that easily grades as an A. Call it an A+ if you want. I mean, the only way I can knock them at all, I guess, is if you say they didn't get Ohtani or Yamamoto, who were probably their top two targets, and both players ended up on the Dodgers. But there's kind of nothing you could do about that. Ohtani wanted to be a Dodger. It is pretty clear. And for the Giants, their updated projection, according to Fangraphs, is 83.2 wins. And you might think that's not very impressive. It's not like super impressive, but you basically have two powerhouse teams in the Dodgers and the Braves, and then nobody else really separating themselves outside of those two teams. And so you're kind of in a scrum for just a wild card spot. Someone's got to win the Central. There's a bunch of teams that are kind of close to each other. Basically, every team in that division, except maybe the Pirates, could win the Central. And then 3 wild card spots up for grabs. I think the Phillies probably get one. And then the Giants, I think, have as good of a shot as anybody else in the National League to be one of those other wild card teams. So, of course, they could win the division. Fangraphs gives them 9% odds of winning the division, 44.4% odds of making the postseason in general. I would take the over on that. I think, I would just take the over on that. But still, like, if you look at the odds for all the teams, there's not a lot of teams that are much higher than that. It's the Dodgers and the Braves, and then a bunch of teams in that range of like 50 to 40%. But, and even down into the high 20s, etc. So anyway, coming up in just a minute, what does the roster look like now? Who's getting bumped off? And like, what does the rotation look like with Blake Snell? All of that coming up momentarily. And before we get into it, today's episode is brought to you in part by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels lets you dive in to all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on the latest in the world of sports. March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more, not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, even cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you really should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Today's episode is brought to you in part by FanDuel. That's right. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. It's simple. Head to FanDuel.com/LockedOn And I'm checking it out right now. You can make that $5 bet on anything, and if that bet wins, you get $200 in bonus bet. So I'm just looking for who's the heaviest favorite, just kind of scrolling through. Stetson at Connecticut. Connecticut minus 20,000 favorites on the money line. $5 bet there. If it wins, $200 in bonus bets at fanduel.com/lockedon. Bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. All right, here we go. We're going to analyze the Giants roster now that they have agreed to terms with Blake Snell. This is still pending a physical. We're all always holding our breath for all time now. Whenever they reportedly sign someone, when it's pending a physical, which they always are pending a physical. But after what happened with Carlos Correa, we're just never going to get over that. At least I'm not. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers. Tomorrow on the show, we'll probably be discussing this with either Sully from Locked On MLB, who I plan to talk to about Blake Snell and the Giants offseason, or Millard Thomas from Locked On D-backs, who's going to backtrack his takes that you're going to hear on the division preview kind of show that we discussed earlier, coming up tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific. So I also want to talk to Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres. So a lot of crossovers coming up in the coming days as we get ready for the regular season here. So Giants roster with Blake Snell. So let's start with the starting rotation. Obviously, you have Logan Webb, I think, deserves to be that number one starter and make that opening day start. It would be weird if they went with Snell over Webb. That's just typically how you see these things go down. Even though Snell finished first in Cy Young voting and Webb finished second, you don't base it based on that. You base it based on Webb has been here. This is his team. Snell's a newcomer. Let Snell pitch the second game, whatever. But my question is Snell even going to be ready to pitch that second game? That's definitely a question, and I'm not sure what the answer is. We'll obviously find out more if and when they have their press conference, which I will likely be able to attend on Zoom. And so I'll have all the kind of every little answer I will be listening to and writing down any key points. So that's another thing to look out for later in the week once that happens. So outside of Webb and Snell, let's just imagine, whether it takes a week or whatever, that Blake Snell is in that rotation. And then after that, I think we know that Jordan Hicks is in that rotation. I'm breaking up the lefties here because I could go Kyle Harrison third, but I'm just kind of going right, left for my first four. So I'm putting Jordan Hicks in the 3 spot in that rotation, and then Kyle Harrison, take some pressure off of him, put him in that number 4 spot in the rotation. And then suddenly there's just one kind of open spot, which I think I've been discussing like for months, that I think this, adding Snell just takes a lot of pressure off these young, inexperienced arms. And so then, Harrison is such a good prospect. He debuted last year. We saw the upside. It's not like crazy to just pencil him into that rotation, but then that 5th starter spot, that's where you get inexperience and maybe kind of it's a competition and we don't quite know who it's going to be. So there's Keaton Winn in that mix. He has the advantage of already being on the 40-man roster. There's Mason Black in that mix. There's Landon Roop in that mix. Dalton Jeffries, like a bunch of kind of guys who aren't necessarily household names, even with Giants fans. I think we know Keaton Winn. You've probably heard about Mason Black. You've probably heard about Landon Roop by this point. Keaton Winn, with the advantage of being on the 40-man already, I would probably imagine that he opens the season as that 5th starter if Blake Snell is able to go through the first turn. If not, then they're going to have to figure out what to do in order to kind of get through at least one turn of the rotation without Snell. So in the bullpen, as I've said a bunch of times, they have 5 just kind of clear and obvious guys with Doval, Rogers, Luke Jackson, and Ryan Walker. And outside of that, it's anyone's guess how the last 3 spots are going to go. I assume an 8-man bullpen, 5-man starting rotation, 13 player pitcher mix, and 13 position players. So, I mean, I have no idea. This is where Roop, Black, Dalton Jeffries, Spencer Howard, and others just kind of could be the guys there. This could be how they work in some of their young arms like Black and Roop. It could be in kind of long roles in the rotation. In the bullpen. So I have no idea. But what I do know is that Alex Cobb is close to, like, he's way ahead of schedule. And so suddenly that would take a Keaton win out of the rotation. And then it's like Webb, Snell, Hicks, Harrison, Cobb. Although you probably would go Webb, Snell, Cobb, Harrison, Hicks. And that's just like a really good rotation. And then suddenly, at some point in the second half, you're going to have Robbie Ray, the 2021 Cy Young Award winner, rehabbing from Tommy John surgery. And then you're going to have Webb, Snell, Cobb, Robbie Ray, and then either like whoever's pitching well. It's just whether it's Kyle Harrison or Jordan Hicks or whatever. And if Jordan Hicks struggles in that role, you could move him to the pen, or if you want to kind of not put too much stress on his arm when he's doing this for the first time, in terms of being a starter full-time, you could just move him to the bullpen and suddenly you have an electric duo at the back end with Doval and Hicks. And so all of this adds up to me to being just a pretty dynamic and good pitching staff outside of the kind of unknown of the final 3 spots in the bullpen to start the season. But when Cobb and Ray come back, it kind of pushes other guys down the chain a little bit and strengthens that bullpen even more. So the position player side hasn't really changed since the last time we discussed it. I still think Nick Ahmed is the favorite to start the season as the shortstop, but Marco Luciano is in play as well. He is on the 40-man. Ahmed is not, so that could come into play, but I think Ahmed's a pretty safe bet to be the opening day shortstop, and everybody else, there's really no surprises. It looks like a pretty good roster. They're not the Dodgers, but it looks like a pretty good roster. So well done, Giants, this offseason. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow is probably going to be talking with Sully from Locked On MLB or Millard Thomas from Locked On D-backs. I'm going to ask him some tough questions because he had some harsh things to say about the Giants not long ago, and he's going to have to backtrack on those, and it's going to be pretty funny. So I look forward to that conversation whenever it takes place. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much. So thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.